Sarah, welcome to the Science of Psychotherapy. It's so great to meet you.
Wonderful to be here. Thanks for having me, guys.
And Richard here, of course. It's wonderful after lots of backs and forwards and things and introductions to you. But it is so exciting to have you in. One of the things that we really love is people who know a lot, and we have lots of those come onto our show. And we also love people who have lived experience, and we have some of those who come on the show. And we think we've got a combination of both here, which is just perfect. And as we've described, what you talk about and what you have experienced is the condition that is broadly known just by the simple word bipolar. But you have written a fabulous book, and that book has been turned into a film. Now, when did you come to grips with this and decided then that you needed to tell people about it?
Thank you so much, Richard, for having me and for reading the book. I usually start time here with my first bipolar, what I call bipolar breakdown, which was a severe depression when I was 21, a senior at Brown University here in New England, pretty much on top of the world, with wonderful friends and a 4.0 and heading to med school and playing varsity sports, etc. And one day, as if a switch had flipped, all of a sudden, I went into this tailspin, crashing to the earth, and with this terrifying brain breakdown that I had never experienced before and had no idea what was happening. So that was at age 21. And it really, to mention the gap, took 4 decades for me to be willing to tell my story. Now, I know I don't look that old, but if I did look that old, if we do the math, it was really almost 4 decades almost to the day before I was willing to, quote, come out with my story.
I mean, interestingly, that's not an uncommon story. There's the situation of people taking a long time to really come to grips with where they are. But one of the big problems that I found in the conversation, Matt and I found in our conversations with people in my early experience, was the amount of time it took the medical profession to know what the hell was going on.
Yeah.
Now, so absolutely. You had this event at 21. Mm-hmm. When did anybody seem to come to grips with what it was, and what were the sorts of things that they thought it was before they finally worked it out?
Right. Well, I say this is the truth. It took 25 years, 5 psychiatrists, and 7 medications before I got my bipolar 2 diagnosis, which saved my life, I think, because of the medications that I got as a result. Before that, there was 4 psychiatrists who got it wrong. And basically what happened was, and I talk about this in the book and in my TED Talk, is that when somebody like me with bipolar 2 shows up in a doctor's office, be it your primary care physician, nurse practitioner, psychiatrist, or whoever, you're going to show up with the depressive symptoms. You're not going to show up if you're feeling good. So if it's a practitioner who's not super skillful, I'm going to appear with, listlessness, suicidal ideation, maybe inability to experience any joy, wanting to, leave the planet. And they're going to say, oh, this person looks depressed. They're depressed. They're going to diagnose me with clinical depression and then give me an antidepressant. And the problem is for people like me, you probably know, Richard, is that in a lot of cases, if you give a person with bipolar an antidepressant, it's going to make them worse. It could start out looking like it's working and then trigger mania or all kinds of difficult, dangerous, and even lethal side effects. So there you have it. It finally took the 5th psychiatrist, who was very skillful and familiar with the whole bipolar spectrum, to recognize what was going on for me and use a very simple diagnostic and get it right in 15 minutes.
Right. And do you think part of that problem is looking just at the immediate symptoms that you're presenting with, rather than taking a comprehensive history and considering the other things that are masked at that moment when you're turning up?
Exactly. And, I say that somebody who is a practitioner needs to have a lens around bipolar spectrum, because what I have is bipolar without mania. I don't have full-blown mania. And millions of people like me, and some of the doctors I've been working with researching for the film, will say that more than half the people with bipolar, significantly more, actually have some form of bipolar without mania. So it takes a skillful doctor to recognize it, but the diagnostic scales are out there in the public domain. You can find it on my website now. And it's one page and like 11 questions. It's not hard to get on the right track of screening someone for bipolar if you think to look for it. And
that's the key. And the key of the thing that we're saying to a lot of therapists, and through our book, the Science of Psychotherapy work, is if you think to look for it. And so we need to know as therapists, and as we're saying to you, a lot of therapists listening to this, we need to know about stuff. Now, we may not even have to be experts, but we're general practitioners. We're broad scope practitioners. And when someone comes into the room, there are so many behavioral things, sure, that we can see, that are talking to us about biological things which we can't see. And as you say, there is just a simple questionnaire that you can give to someone if you get this inkling of, okay, I think this is depression, but let's just check. And with a simple questionnaire, what is it, about 10 or 11 questions you were saying?
Yeah, it takes 10 minutes. I mean, you guys are therapists, so I have to tell you, I've been to wonderful therapists in my life. Where we live out here, there's all kinds of brilliant people. One of them, after several years, and it took me, like we said, 25 years to get the proper diagnosis. She came to me in tears. She was highly revered in our community, saying, "I'm so sorry. I didn't know that this existed. I turned you in the wrong direction." And then another one who's amazing, she's the one who said to me, "You got to write this book, Sarah. My colleagues don't know that there's a bipolar spectrum, that there's bipolar without mania." She got me to get on the track of writing it. So I do think that for a therapist like yourself, and the doctors that I've been working with now say, always screen for bipolarity with someone who looks depressed. Because if you get it wrong, you're going to do more harm than good. If they go off on an antidepressant track, it's so easy. Screen for bipolarity if you think this might be, if there's any chance it might be going on.
So the hypomanic symptoms are often, especially in today, they can be very functional. And so it may not appear as any sort of problem. Are you able to just speak to us a little bit about the hypomania and what that looks like and how that all plays into maybe not being diagnosed or misdiagnosing someone?
Yeah, I mean, there's a spectrum there too, and it's subtle, right? So I come from a family of high energy folks, and if you saw me during the day, like when I was coming up, and even now, people will say something like, "You get twice as much done as anybody I know." But my husband also gets twice as much done, and he's not bipolar. So high energy, it's kind of an indicator. But what's the difference between mania and hypomania? I have here one of your countrymen, Michael Burke. He's wonderful. I think it was him or else Dr. Phelps, the 4 A's. Okay. So the 4 A's of hypomania are anxiety, anger, agitation, and attention difficulties. It can also, in addition to high energy. So if you have somebody who you gave an antidepressant, or they're your client and they're on an antidepressant, and all of a sudden they have this atypical hair trigger temper, which is what happened with me. I'm pretty even around temper, and my husband's like, "What's going on here?" Because all of a sudden I was like, had this this quick anger, and for somebody else it might be anxiety, agitation, anger, attention stuff. That's, I guess, if it's in the dysfunctional phase, but there's also a phase of hypomania that's high energy and people feel good, and they're not going to show up to their doctor because they're not depressed, but they're also not going to show up to the doctor because they're not full-blown manic. People who are full-blown manic, their family takes them because they're up all night, or they think they're God, or they're doing, irresponsible behaviors, maybe something dangerous. So in that case, it's easier to diagnose. It's easier to get to a doctor, right? But hypomania is tougher to identify.
Yes, I remember Stephen Fry in some of his specials. He was talking about the English raconteur who lives with bipolar, and he said he would go shopping But he was a highly successful person, earning lots of money, and people would think, "Oh, that's all right. You're going shopping." He said, "But you come round to my house, and you know, it looks like I've just had my wedding shower because I've got 6 toasters and 4 TVs and 3 vacuum cleaners, and you know, all." So that was one of the aspects. But then on the other hand, I've got a piece of film that I use in some of the presentations I do, and just on YouTube, and a young lass sitting there, quite disoriented, quite almost out of control, and she was almost, you know, eyes were, you know, wow, and I don't know what's going on, and and she was talking about this in her kitchen, and then a baby gurgled in the side. And he said, "Oh, that's all right. Just it'll be fine. Oh, the next minute I'll be lying on the floor and I won't be able to speak." And I thought, wow, and you're at home. So this aspect of people who live with the experience without really, how are you cared for in a situation where it captures you and you're just at home in the kitchen with the baby?
If there's severe depression going on, because again, I haven't had that experience of mania that you're describing right now, I think. But you know, it's tough, man. I mean, I'm very lucky that I have very supportive family, supportive husband. He likes me to always champion him, you know, but truly he showed up, man, day after day after day. It is essential to have that kind of support. And I think for people who are family and potential friends and potential allies to understand that this person has a broken brain right now. It's not that they don't want to do the dishes, they can't. It's not that they don't want to, you know, go shopping. They can't figure out how to pick out the peanut butters. It's not that they don't want to do the laundry. It's not possible to sequence, you know, folding, putting away, and figuring out clothes. I talk about this a lot in my TED Talk because I want people to understand what I mean when I say broken brain. It's, for me, it's not just emotional. It's first physical. Like the brain stops working. It's terrifying. It's incapacitating. It's crippling. And you really can't do the day-to-day. So I talk about, like, for me, I have zero judgment of people in the streets, you know, because there, but for the grace of God go I. You know, if I didn't have Joe and I didn't have my family, I didn't have people who showed up for me, who knows? You know, it's difficult.
Is it useful for, yeah. And I mean, you've got your list of people that are you can access. Is it useful for a therapist who might be one of the people that the person would call to sort of organize a little bit of a referral list, so that if the therapist happens to get the call from the client, they say, "Oh, now call your mother or call your husband or call this." Is that something? And I'm just thinking that off the. I know I've thought that before, and I do have some forward calling things to some of my clients.
Yeah. Well, here's how I talk about it, Richard, because after the book came out, people would come to me and go, "Oh my God, I'm deer in the headlights. Like, I don't know how to help my friend, or I didn't know how to help my cousin. What's your advice?" So I actually wrote something up around this. I call it the Emergency Mental Health Team Toolkit, and it's 4 things for allies, right? The first thing is reach in. Don't expect them to reach out. They can't. So as a therapist, to say, call your mother, call your doctor, I'm not gonna. I can't find the phone. I can't find the phone number. I don't think they want to talk to me. My self-esteem is so low that, you know, why would my best friend take a moment to care for me? So I'm not going to reach out. I need you to reach in. So I would more likely call the mother, call the best friend, call this one, call that one. Your instinct is good. It gets help for them, but the help has to reach in, you know, and then I say, help, do the basics, fill the freezer, pick up the kids. They can't do it. You know, you would do that if as a cancer patient. You don't know you have to do it for this depressed person. It's not, you can't see. I mean, when I look at pictures of myself when I've been really depressed, I look like this. You can't see what's going on inside that person's brain, but believe me, you're going to have to fill the freezer for them. And the other thing is, like a therapist, don't try to fix it. You can't. Just listen. listen without shame, without judgment or trying to fix it. And then the last one is get a posse, because you're not going to be able to do it alone. You need support for you. So those are the things that that I would encourage a therapist or a friend to do. Again, super lucky where I live. We have a lot of community. I was in a women's circle for 20 years, and they figured it out. Like one of them was on point, and she said, okay, you're filling the freezer, you're picking up the kids, you call the psychiatrist. And, I don't know what I would have done without those women.
Yeah. Now, Sarah, no doubt you've had both good and bad experiences with therapists. And since we're speaking to a lot of therapists today, I'm wondering if we can sort of touch on some of those experiences and sort of glean, what really is effective therapy for someone with specifically bipolar 2.
I've mostly had good experience with therapists. God bless them. The issue was that they didn't know what bipolar 2 was. They didn't know that there was a spectrum. They didn't. So I might have got bad advice until they figured it out or we got the diagnosis. I might have gotten the advice like, which I got, oh, you don't need medication. Or if you just do this and this kind of thing, you're going to be better. But it turned out I really did need medication. And some of the doctors that I work with, they talk about 4 things. I made it into a diamond. If you've got bipolar like me, you're going to need medication. You might need therapy from time to time. You need your support network, and you need to do your practices for a healthy brain, which I can tell you about in a minute. But at any rate, so I would encourage the therapist to help give them that framework, which practice for healthy brain, I'll tell you about in a minute. They're going to need therapy. They're going to need support network. They're going to need medication. And then the other thing that I think is really crucial, and one of your colleagues pointed it out to me recently when he read the book. He said, when I read this, I started cheering out loud. And that is, I would say that therapists and psychopharmacologists, psychiatrists have to partner, right? The psychiatrist can't do it alone because they're just writing scripts and they don't know what's going on for you. But the therapist can't do it alone because they don't have the psychopharmacology background. And they really need to be partnering. At the end, when I finally got the diagnosis that worked and the therapist, that the two of them worked together, which was really helpful for me emotionally, psychologically, to know I had the support from both sides, and it worked.
Yeah, that's brilliant. And we are always advocating for interdisciplinary, sort of teamwork.
Yes, absolutely. And it really needs to happen. And I got to say, all power to psychiatrist number 5 who got it right, so to speak. This guy's now 80. He's got office hours every Monday through Thursday, 52 weeks a year from 9 to 10 p.m. You can call that guy. And when you're stressed out and med's not working, whatever, that's a huge support. And my therapist also could call him then. So if you're any psychiatrists out there, do it, because that's been huge.
Yeah, it's so important. Actually, in our book, we include a section talking about medications. We're more specifically just sort of in there because we couldn't do everything. And therapists are saying, well, why do I need to know about medications? And I said, yeah. And I used to say, and I say quite often, I said, not only does it give you an understanding of what the client is going through, and again, you don't have to know it to the point of prescription. You just need to know about it. What's the difference between an antipsychotic and an anticonvulsant and an SSRI? But it also gives you an insight into the mindset of the psychiatrist. And so you're immediately, just by looking at the drug prescriptions, you're able to begin establishing a rapport with the other therapist. And there's nothing I would think that a psychiatrist enjoys more than a therapist who rings up and says, I've had a look at the medications and I understand that you're treating them for this, this, and this. What can I do to help?
I mean, for the therapist listening to this, I think you should do it for every one of your patients that's on some kind of med. You need to call that psychiatrist and say, what are you thinking? Is this a mood stabilizer because you think they're bipolar? Is it, is antidepressant because you think this? And really work together on that. The other thing I really want your therapist to know, because most people don't, is if this person, the me, has been on an antidepressant for a while, and all of a sudden you notice or they notice that they're getting hypomanic, like their family's telling you, whoa, these guys are angry. They've never been angry before. All of a sudden they're anxious and they're up at night, or all of a sudden, they can't pay attention. For a therapist, that should trigger, oh, potential bipolar. This is hypomania and bipolar 2. Let's talk to the psychiatrist about this, because the therapist is going to have probably more consistent meetings with the person living with bipolar than the psychiatrist is. So they got to track that. And I tell that to families too, like track it, talk to the therapist of this person, give somebody feedback. Because in my case, I didn't really know that this was going on. My best friend and my husband said, whoa, that's a little quick trigger for you than usual, but so yeah, that's a sign. Pay attention.
And just quickly, I want to get to those practices for the healthy brain, but just a quick put in that we talk about in the system. They talk about bipolar 1, which has got a bit more of a combination of the manic and the depression, what people might sort of term the sort of the more stereotypical, but it's not. Then there's bipolar 2, which is more to do with depression and not so much of the mania. And this is distinguishable and needs to be distinguished from what we call unipolar depression, which is so everybody get out there and just remind them, bipolar, unipolar, they're distinct, they're different things, and also in the anxiety frame. So just as a quick education there. And now this wonderful thing, practices for the healthy brain.
Yeah.
I love the sound
Just
of that.
Before I jump into that, Richard, I should mention, the subtitle of the book is From Broken to Blessed in the Bipolar Spectrum. And even though I have a bipolar 2 diagnosis, which is helpful and clear, I just want people to know that, like everything else in life, it's a rainbow. It's not super clear, black and white. And so you may not fall specifically in the bipolar 2 classic, but you've got some form of bipolar without mania. So those are important. You can respond beautifully to bipolar medications, mood stabilizers and stuff. So the spectrum is interesting. And we talked about Dr. Jim Phelps. He has a brilliant website called psycheducation.org and talks all about that mood spectrum. Okay, so practice for healthy brain. So I mentioned the 4 things, right? Therapy, medication, support team, and then the practices. And it turns out that, I don't know if by like constellation or how I was trained or personality or something, I have the gift of being disciplined. All right. So once I started learning that thing 1, if I get into a bipolar flare, it's disaster. It's living hell and disaster. So what's on the other side of that for me? The risk of that is massive. Then thing 2 is, there's things you can do to help prevent. Okay, let's do those. And now that I'm doing them, I'd been doing them for years, but as a result of research for the film, I'm finding out there's a lot of really solid, rigorous scientific data to support some of the things I've been doing. So I call them PECs. It's easy to remember, acronym PECs, flex your PECs. They stand for physical, emotional, creative, and spiritual. So if you're bipolar out there, or if you're a therapist helping somebody, doing practices in each of these domains can really help support you and help be part of that constellation of medication, therapy, et cetera. You can have agency and be proactive and take some control over your genetics, this way. So for me, physical, okay, I'm lucky I was an athlete. I like doing aerobics anyway. I'm out there hiking, I'm out there swimming. Moving your body is huge. Stretching. Emotional, social, or the things we've been learning. We learned from the pandemic that isolation is disaster. And from some of the scientists we talked to, and I think the guy was from Australia, you can actually find markers for inflammation in people who've had isolation. It's like there's like markers for isolation in the blood, but that's a little bit of a digression. So doing things that are emotionally connected, not just on the screen, but in real life. It has a huge impact, so it's, I say you can be efficient, go on a hike with a buddy, or go to chorus with your neighbor who dragged me to chorus the last time I had a depressed, and it was very helpful. And we've been singing for 7 years. In creative is all those kinds of things like drawing or painting or cooking or writing. I'm a writer. I love to write. I'm not a drawer, but something that helps you get on the other side of your brain and more expansive in your brain. And then spiritual would be, you don't have to be a religious person if you are, great, but otherwise meditation or just get outside, unplug from technology and breathe the air. They call it forest bathe. So those are some examples of PECs, but you do what works for you. And you find, don't try to do it all. If it comes overwhelming, try one thing a day. Some of the other really important, it's coming up time and over again now in the research for the film, is circadian rhythms are so key for people with bipolar. We're more sensitive to light. You got to get to bed by 10 or 10:30. You got to have a steady bedtime and get up at a steady time. That's hard for us because particularly if we're in a bipolar flare, we feel better way at 2 a.m. But setting up that steady sleep. So I'm pretty disciplined about that. They'll go, oh, just watch one more episode of, Ted Lasso. And I'm like, no, I got to go to bed, guys.
So that's all part of the first one, the physical.
Yeah. Yes.
About. And would diet, is that sort of, have you found, is there
diet is huge? Yes. So, you could get super strict about this and get overwhelmed. But it's sort of classic, try not to have this like high sugar. One of the things we're learning though, is there's this huge gut brain connection, and the microbiome, which is inside your gut and other parts of your body. They've proven now that there's a big research area. This guy called John Cryan in UK, he wrote a book called The Psychobiotic. I don't know if you guys interviewed him yet. And they've made a connection between, a lot of neurotransmitters are made in your gut, but also your immune system. So the diversity of flora. So I do like kombucha or miso or sauerkraut or yogurt, kefir. Find something that you like that's a fermented food. That's going to be really important. And that's been good. And
yes,
then
I'll just quickly to refer people, because we actually did a documentary, one of our documentaries on the gut brain axis and on all this stuff.
Cool.
So we're right up with you, and you're right up with the stuff. So it's
and then another one that's a little tough for again, discipline, but you could sort of work up to it. What I've been learning from the whole circadian rhythm story is that you also don't want to eat after a certain hour because your body needs to shut down. It shifts its metabolic processes, and sort of goes with like 4 billion years of history of how the earth turns. You guys are ahead of me by a day. It's Thursday, it's Wednesday, we're on, but so we weren't designed to be doing metabolic activities really late in the night. So you want to give your metabolic stuff a chance to take a break. So I've been doing a 14-hour thing for a while now, since COVID, being like, finish eating by 7, start eating 9 in the morning. You could start with 12, work up, but I found out that that's actually proven by the microbiome theory and the circadian rhythm theory.
Right. So you're saying that my staying up till midnight watching Netflix and eating sweets is no good.
If you're bipolar, really not good. If you're not bipolar, still not good.
Absolutely.
That's what they say. Yeah, I think it's true. Try to get your kid. I mean, my kids are 21 and juniors in college, and they're like, they're getting strep throat or whatever. I'm like, you guys, you got to get to bed before 2 a.m.
There's such a surprisingly difficult thing, because this development of the world, which is the radical social and cultural changes just over the last 200 years or so since the Industrial Revolution, have taken our mentalizing, our thinking by storm, but they've actually been beating our bodies around like a sad sack of stuff. And what you're talking about and all those things, I just wrote down as I was writing, just maintain a whole experience. It's extraordinary. My wife's a body worker, and she says, cool. Years ago we were saying, and she said to someone, they said, oh, exercise, and she said, listen, 60 to 70% of your body does nothing but move you. Muscles, tendons, things, aspects of the brain that do that. So I think movement's probably pretty important.
Yeah, smart.
And
absolutely.
So
that's how we had to catch a deer. We're going to eat. We had to run.
And those imperative needs. That's exactly right. There's a degree to which, this type of capacity for us to move into all kinds of different mental states, and we have dispositions which incline us, like you have a biological disposition which inclines to move you towards bipolar, is going to be only exacerbated if we're moving way beyond the nature of the body.
Yeah, absolutely.
So, yeah, so it's not about being weird about it, but it's certainly about not being weird the other way, as you say, Matt. And Matt doesn't actually sit up till midnight eating sweets, but he was on occasion. And again, that's another thing. On occasion, we are organized as a species over many, many hundreds of thousands of years to feast and to famine, to do the extraordinary every now and again.
It's fine. Yeah. And one night a week, I am a Shabbat practitioner. That's a different book, Richard. But one night a week, it's like all things are on, anything goes, which is good because you want to have like a release valve, so you're not feeling so deprived. But I think, the discipline over time, you find that your body just feels better and you feel more stable. And that's true for anybody again. But for people like me with bipolar brain, there's just so much more at risk. And so taking those precautions, if you want preventive medicine, is really key. I got to tell you two more. You ready? Because you talked about how we've evolved, to be up all night. Well, those little lights in your room, that's like your alarm clock, and the little thing of where you're plugging in is a little red dot or whatever. Those lights are really bad for us and they screw up our pituitary. So Dr. Phelps, and this is also proven, talks about quality darkness. At night, I put on the eye silk mask, you want pure black. And then related to that is the blue light that comes off of screens messes us up because if we're doing it too late, it screws up our melatonin production. So after a certain hour, you shouldn't be on screens at all, or you can wear these amber glasses that filter out the blue light. So at night, I got my amber glasses on when I'm trying to do the New York Times crossword puzzle. And then I try not to stay up too late, and then the silk mask comes on, so it's black.
That is so important. Once upon a time, I used to be a paramedic and would work, rotational, night shifts and that, and would really, stuff up your circadian rhythm because you were never in a pattern. But what was absolutely essential was to be in a blacked out room when you did get a chance to sleep. And temperature was important too. It had to be cool. So you had to be in a cool, blacked out room to simply survive doing rotational shift work.
Wow.
So totally understand how that's.
I mean, somebody with bipolar can't really do the third shift. They can't be flight attendants. I don't mean to say can't, but it's dangerous because the circadian rhythm thing is really so important. I mean, I would be nervous about coming to visit you because the 12-hour time difference would screw me up. So, maybe take a boat.
Yeah.
Take a while.
But just on the lights thing, my wife is particularly aware of it. She's wonderful. It's like a melding of brains, and more or less I get looked after. But at hotel rooms where there's always these little red lights and TVs and bits and pieces, and I'm sent off on kill the lights patrol. So in the morning there's various pairs of underwear and towels and things hanging over stuff. So but what I'm actually telling the story for, besides a bit of a laugh, is we also make it fun. So instead of going, these lights, what are we going to do? And I say, I'm on underwear patrol. And
my amber glasses, my kids are telling me that my amber glasses are pretty cool. So I look like Sting or something. So you got to, like you said, you got to make it fun.
Yeah, life is always a fun thing. Now, of course, you wrote the book. It came out in 2022, the BrainStorm, From Broken to Blessed. I love it, on the bipolar spectrum. And then you started then going out talking and presenting, as say TEDx you've done, and various other bits and pieces. Here you are talking to us. Yeah. But you got involved in this film, BrainStorm, the film, and we'll have links and connections to all these website and everything in our show notes. But tell us about that, because we love doing films, and what a great opportunity this was.
So cool. First, I just got to show you the book.
Oh yes, please.
I love my cover. I still love my cover, and so that's the book. I hope you guys will get it.
My favorite thing's the butterfly. No, we got that. It's all right.
A lot of people tell me it's a really good read, so you couldn't put it down. Amen. The film. So what happened was, Richard, and Matthew, I was terrified to come out with my story It really was, because of the stigma. I was afraid I was going to lose clients of consulting practice, that I would feel shame, and my kids might be feel shame, and et cetera, et cetera. My heart pounded before I came out with this thing, but I finally decided to do it. So, but once I'm out, because the mission of the book is to end the stigma, save lives, maximize healing. I want to shout from the mountaintops. I want to sell 1 million copies. And truly, I have to say, it's dedicated to my mother and my grandfather, because this lineage goes back. If one person could not suffer because of this book, it was worth it, right? So, but let's sell 1 million. Let's get 2 million views. Well, so the story goes that got a pack of friends from college. One of them, we're on a little reunion that a friend of us had organized. One of them is this brilliant filmmaker named Bonnie Walsh. And I got the idea. I said, hey, Bonnie, what do you think? Because Bonnie had just had a film called Earth Emergency on PBS National. That's our, I don't know what the equivalent is in Australia, but that's our national public broadcasting system. That's a big deal. It's hard to do. So she had a national Earth Emergency broadcast. And I said to her, hey, Bon, she'd read the book and she was moved by it, and had written me a beautiful thing back. Could we do a PBS film on BrainStorm, the bipolar spectrum? And she goes, I have no idea what I'm talking about. So she says, well, you can't do a PBS film. You have to make a best film you could, and then try and pitch it to them, see if they take it. But let me ask Melanie. So who's Melanie? Melanie is Melanie Wallace, and she is from Nova in Boston, which is the big PBS science series. She's been, it's very well highly regarded. She's been there 40 years as senior producer. She has Emmys, et cetera. And at first, Melanie thought, bipolar's been done. But then she read the book, she listened to the book, she listened to TED Talk, and she met me and she said, this is a story that has to be told. So now I got my director and producer. Then we need to get some funding. And we had an anonymous donation from a wonderful doctor who's dedicated to bipolar, to the bipolar mood spectrum. Then we got another amazing donation from a friend who has 2 bipolar children. So we're underway. And then what happened, we started to attract amazing characters who have lived experience with bipolar or living with bipolar. Because the Bonnie and Melanie are science documentarians. So we wanted to create an unprecedented thing, which would be a coherent narrative, people living with bipolar who have amazing characters, the science, the cutting edge breakthrough science, and then breakthrough treatments and wellness practices like PECs. So we'd weave that story. So we've been meeting these amazing people I can tell you about. We've also been talking to unbelievably brilliant scientists from around the world. It's a very exciting project.
That's really brilliant. So you're still in a pre-production stage at the moment?
Exactly. Yeah. We're interviewing scientists. We're meeting people. We're raising funds. Bonnie thinks that we'll start shooting somewhere in summer, and then hopefully the film will be ready 2025, I guess, a couple of years.
Okay. All right. Well, we'll certainly point people in your direction in terms of funding if anyone wants to support that project. Yeah.
Thank you so much. Yeah, we're 25% of the way towards our budget, $500,000 towards 2 million. And then the other thing is, if people want to stay involved and hear about the film, we're going to do mini films as we go. They can go to brainstormthefilm.com. It'll be in your notes, and just click stay in touch, contact us.
Yeah.
The shocking thing about this, because there's so much shame and stigma around it, and I'm thinking I'm part of the Walking Wounded, is to learn about all these magnificent people with bipolar, creativity and drive and innovation. But my editor, when I was still afraid to come out with a book, she gave me an assignment: go home and write, I'm bipolar and a better person because of it. And I wrote a 2-page essay. And at that point, I was ready to press send. And so I came up with 4 things. That tends to be my thing, 4 things. So I'll tell you the 4 things if we have time. So basically what it is that we have emerged like Phoenix from the ashes, having been to hell and back, right? And when you go through that excruciating experience and you live through it, it develops some qualities of character and soul. One is emotional fearlessness, which is that there's nothing you could do to me, Richard or Matthew, that my brain hasn't already tried to do to me to kill me off. So you will not scare me and I will not leave you. Another is compassion, which is related, but for the grace of God, like I said, I could be in the streets or needle in my arm or worse. I will not judge you for your addiction or anything else. And then the next thing is discipline, because I know what's on the other side of not doing the preventive PECs. So I can help you with your PECs. And people in my family go, and my friends, you're to my North Star on self-care. How do you do it? And I'll say, okay, well, come, and then the last thing is just gratitude, like beyond compare, which is contagious. And, people say, wow, how's that happen? Well, because I've been to hell and back. And when you've been to hell and back and you have a day where your brain is working and your body's working, it's truly a miracle. So,
wow, those are some very powerful characteristics coming out of your experience.
And a wonderfully beautiful conclusion to this experience today.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much for being with us today, Sara.
Total delight to be with you guys. Thank you for having me.
Bye.